Have you ever wondered how Nigeria, a country with over 250 ethnic groups and diverse cultures, came to be a single nation? The story isn't a simple one, and a huge part of it involves the British Empire. Let us rewind the clock and explore how Britain conquered and ruled the lands that would become modern-day Nigeria. Our story begins long before the British flag was ever planted on Nigerian soil. For centuries, various powerful kingdoms and empires flourished here: the Uyo Empire in the southwest, the Benin Kingdom with its incredible bronze art, the Kanem-Bornu Empire in the northeast, and the Sokoto Caliphate, a vast Islamic state in the north. These societies had their own complex political systems, trade networks, and rich cultures. So, where do the British come in? Initially, their interest was purely commercial. Starting in the 16th century, British ships arrived on the coast, not to rule, but to trade. Tragically, this trade was dominated by the transatlantic slave trade. European traders, including the British, exchanged goods like guns and alcohol for enslaved Africans, a horrific business that lasted for centuries and devastated local communities. By the early 19th century, things began to shift. Britain outlawed the slave trade and started promoting what they called legitimate commerce, focusing on products like palm oil, which was in high demand for industrial lubricants and soap in Europe. This new economic interest pulled the British deeper into the region's internal affairs. They started signing treaties with local coastal chiefs, often using their naval power to influence politics and secure favorable trade terms. A key moment was in 1851, when the British bombarded Lagos, a major port, and installed a more compliant ruler. 10 years later, in 1861, they annexed Lagos completely, turning it into their first formal colony in the area. This was the first piece of the puzzle. The real game changer was the scramble for Africa in the late 19th century. European powers were in a frenzy to carve up the continent for themselves, and Britain didn't want to lose out to its rivals, France and Germany. To formalize its claims, Britain relied on both military force and clever diplomacy. A major player in this expansion was Sir George Goldie and his Royal Niger Company. Goldie used a strategy of signing hundreds of treaties with local rulers along the Niger and Benue rivers. Many of these chiefs and emirs didn't fully understand what they were signing. The treaties, written in English, often handed over their territory and rights to the company in exchange for protection and a few goods. When diplomacy failed, the company used its private army to crush any resistance. This gave Britain control over a vast area in the interior, which they called the Niger River Delta Protectorate. The conquest wasn't a peaceful affair. It was met with fierce resistance. In the south, the powerful Benin Kingdom tried to maintain its independence. After a trade delegation was ambushed and killed in 1897, the British launched a massive military campaign known as the Benin Punitive Expedition. They captured Benin City, looted thousands of priceless artifacts, the famous Benin bronzes that are still in museums worldwide today, and sent the king, Theoba, into exile. The kingdom was absorbed into their growing territory. In the north, the powerful Sokoto Caliphate, a federation of Islamic emirates, presented an even bigger challenge. Led by Frederick Lugard, the British employed a strategy of divide and rule and superior firepower. They marched on one emirate after another. Cities like Bida and Ilorin fell. The final showdown came in 1903 with the conquest of the major cities of Kano and Sokoto. Despite brave resistance, the Caliphate's armies, armed with swords and spears, were no match for British machine guns. With the fall of Sokoto, the military conquest of what would become Nigeria was largely complete. So, by the early 1900s, Britain had cobbled together these diverse and often rival territories. In 1914, Frederick Lugard took the final step. He amalgamated the Northern Protectorate and the Southern Protectorate into a single entity, the Colony and Protectorate of Nigeria. The name Nigeria itself was reportedly suggested by his wife, Flora Shaw, named after the great river Niger that flows through it. This amalgamation wasn't done for the benefit of the people living there. It was purely for administrative convenience and economic efficiency for the British. The northern and southern regions had vastly different cultures, religions, and administrative styles, and forcing them together under one rule created tensions that would echo for decades to come. With Nigeria now a single colony, Britain established its system of rule. Lugar championed a policy called indirect rule. What did this mean? Instead of having British officials run every town and village, they ruled through the existing local leaders, the Yemers in the north, the Obas and chiefs in the south. On the surface, it seemed less disruptive. It was also cheaper for the British, as it required fewer administrators. In the north, where there were already strong, centralized structures under the Emirs, indirect rule worked relatively smoothly for the British. The Emirs kept their authority over local matters like law and tax collection, as long as they remained loyal to the British Crown and followed the orders of the British resident officer. However, this system also froze the political structure in place and strengthened the power of the traditional aristocracy. In the south, it was a different story. The Yoruba and Igbo societies were often less centralized. In many Igbo communities, for example, there were no single powerful chiefs. Decisions were made by councils of elders and community consensus. The British, not understanding this, tried to impose warrant chiefs, individuals they appointed to act as rulers. These appointed chiefs often had no traditional legitimacy and were seen as puppets of the colonial power, causing a lot of resentment and conflict. The Aba Women's Riot of 1929 was a major protest against the power of these warrant chiefs and the imposition of colonial taxes. Economically, the colony was reshaped to serve Britain's interests. The focus was on producing raw materials for British industries. Farmers were encouraged, and sometimes forced, to grow cash crops like cocoa, palm oil, cotton, and groundnuts for export. A railway system was built, but its primary purpose wasn't to connect Nigerian people. It was to transport these raw materials from the interior to the coastal ports for shipping to Britain. This created an economy dependent on a few export commodities, a structure that would pose challenges for Nigeria long after independence. At the same time, cheap British manufactured goods flooded the Nigerian market, often undermining local crafts and industries. Socially, colonialism brought significant changes. Christian missionaries were very active, especially in the South. They established schools and hospitals, introducing Western education and medicine. This created a new, educated elite who would later become the leaders of the independence movement. However, this education was based on a British model, often devaluing local cultures and languages. In the predominantly Muslim North, the British were more cautious about allowing missionaries in, which resulted in a significant educational gap between the North and South that became another source of political tension. The British also imposed their legal and administrative systems, creating a new layer of governance on top of the traditional ones. All of these actions, the economic exploitation, the political restructuring, and the social engineering were done without the consent of the people. It was a system designed by the British, for the British. But the story doesn't end there. The very forces that colonialism unleashed, Western education, a shared sense of grievance, and the creation of a single Nigerian entity also sowed the seeds of its own destruction. A new generation of Nigerian nationalists, inspired by ideas of freedom and self-determination, began to demand a say in their own future. Leaders like Herbert Macaulay, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Obafemi Awolowo, and Ahmadu Bello emerged, challenging British rule and advocating for independence. After World War II, the tide of history turned against colonialism, and the pressure for independence became unstoppable. Finally, on October 1, 1960, Nigeria gained its independence from Britain. The era of colonial rule was over, but its legacy is complex and endures to this day. The borders drawn by the British, the political structures they created, the economic dependencies they fostered, and the social divisions they sometimes deepened, all continue to shape Nigeria. Understanding this history of conquest and rule is crucial to understanding the challenges and triumphs of Nigeria today. It's a story of power, resistance, and the complex birth of a nation. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into Nigeria's colonial past interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history. See you next time.